Today on the Daily Review, we do a movie from 1970 recommended by my father, Robert K. LaRocca. And the movie is called Joe, starring Peter Boyle and some other people. Today, with your Joe LaRocca. Is it me, or is this show getting sloppier and sloppier? We hit a peak where it was all running smooth, and now I feel like we're back in early 2020 before I knew how to do any of this stuff. It's kind of the transitioning to a new style. Even though the computer's the same, it's operating differently, and I basically have to restart it every day and clear the PR RAM. Not interesting, but it's fine. It's fine. I understand why it's happening, so I'm able, as long as I understand what's happening, I don't mind what's going wrong. Oh, a hurricane took the roof off. That's why it's raining on me. I get it. But if it's just raining on me and the roof's still there, that's what bothers me. Anyway, this is a movie called Joe, which my dad bought me on DVD many years ago. We watched it together. And, he went into it. He said, this is not a fantastic movie, because he's shown me some of the great movies, some of my favorite movies of all time, like Deer Hunter and Raging Bull and stuff. He's like, but it's important because it represents an opinion that was fervent at the time, was permeated culture. So it ends up being a good litmus test, as a lot of cinema is, for what culture and how people felt about race and class in America in the 1970s. And it's directed by John G. Avildsen, who did Rocky and Rocky 5 and The Karate Kid and Lean on Me. He's awesome. He's a great uplifting director normally, except for this movie, which I won't spoil because it is on Amazon Prime, so you can just watch it right up. So it's Peter Boyle. Dennis Patrick plays Bill. Susan Sarandon, in her first role, plays Melissa. And, oh, darn, I didn't write his name down. The boyfriend, whose name is Frank. Darn, because he does a really good performance. Anyway, you can look it up yourself. The movie opens with a really great late, even though it came out in the 70s, but it's got a very late 60s title sequence with it just says Joe in the three letters, but each one is red. One's red, white, and blue, red, white, and then blue, and then the O has a star in the middle, and then each cutout of the letter has different images behind it of Susan Sarandon going about her day and making us fall in love with her, because she's got these big eyes and stuff. She looks like a Raggedy Andy doll. Annie, not Andy. And so the first scene is the first scene really would be an awesome short film. It's just this really run down lower Manhattan apartment where the bathtub is in the same room as the bed, and everything's in one room. And it's also kind of, I think, what America's impression of hippies were. And maybe it's accurate, I don't know, I wasn't there, but it kind of paints hippies as drug dealing, gross, junkie layabout, nudist, sex addict knuckleheads. So that's kind of what we see in this first scene. We see Frank and Melissa taking a bath together, and then Frank does heroin, and she tries to get them to start hooking up, and he gets mad about something because he's all tweaking out, and then she just kind of goes to sleep, and you're like, oh, this is a nightmare. It reminds me a lot of in this Simpsons episode where they're doing the police are putting on a little play to scare people away from drugs, and it shows these hippies, and one's about to eat a sandwich, and in the sandwich it's just a whole baby. And he's like, so it's a little bit of a over amplified version of probably what most hippies were like, even saying the word hippie is kind of generalizing a thing, but it is a movement that that happened in the late 60s. Free love, baby. It was all about the pill and women's lib, right? Free love, free music. So blame it on the pill, dude. It's all dudes' faults for not wanting to have babies. Anyway, anyway, okay. So basically, we get introduced to these druggy characters, and we see how Susan Sarandon's character, Melissa, is kind of a victim, actually, and she's getting her boyfriend's kind of keeping her on drugs and sort of, but just messing with her, and she's just hanging out with bad company. And there's one scene where she goes into a department store and she's all drugged out on just whatever, I don't even know. And she takes out lipstick, and you're like, oh, she's gonna put lipstick on, from one of those like department store little things. And she just starts like drawing on her face, and you're like, whoa, this movie's cool. And then she turns the mirror so that it goes to like the magnified side, and it goes like all funhouse mirror on her face, and you're like, yay, 70s movies, doing things, slowing down to take the time to show us actual moments in people's lives, not just hitting you with story and action every moment, but just letting it kind of breathe, which is great. This movie's great. It's kind of like a twisted hangout movie. Hangout movies are where the characters hang out a lot, so you kind of feel like you're hanging out with them. So watching it becomes a different experience. Movies like Jackie Brown and Reservoir Dogs to a certain degree, but really The Big Lebowski being a perfect example if you feel like you're hanging out with those people. There's a bunch of them. Rio Bravo, that's what Tarantino would say the greatest hangout movie ever is. Dazed and Confused. Okay, anyway, so yeah, we see the negative side of free love and drugs and all this stuff. Damn you, John Lennon. Anyway, Susan then kind of like ODs and freaks out in the store and ends up in the hospital, and her family shows up. Dennis Patrick plays Bill, her father, ends up at the hospital and like kind of finds out what happens and goes to the boyfriend's place, and the boyfriend kind of antagonizes him, so he beats him to death and makes it look like a break-in and a robbery. And anybody from Film One who's watching, that is perfect timing. Plot point one, baby, right at 24 minutes in an hour and 42-minute movie. Perfect, right on the nugget. Avildsen is great at script structure. This is written by Norman Wexler, but it's part of the director's job and the editor's job to hit those marks nicely. And it does. You go, ooh, this just got amped up. And then you start thinking, who the fuck is Joe? It's 27 minutes into this movie. There's nobody named Joe. And then you're like, maybe it's like a general thing. And then it cuts to a bar where we are introduced to Peter Boyle, who you might know from, he plays the wizard in Taxi Driver, 6 years from this movie. And then he also, I was going to say he was a father on Frasier, but that's somebody else. He's a father on Everybody Loves Raymond, I think. I don't know. I've never seen an episode of that show, but yeah. You know what he is? He's Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein. I mean, he's Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster, excuse me. So we are introduced to him pontificating racial... Oh, the light went out. Pontificating all sorts of negative racial slurs and his opinions about I'll boil them down for you without using any words. He feels that black people are just kind of feeding off the system, and they're paid to have babies, and why would you work if you were getting paid to have babies, things like that. I don't agree with these, but this is kind of the opinion of working class six-pack Joe type people in this time period. And you know what? Might not be so different now. He thinks that all rich white kids are all hippies and they're the worst because they've had education and all they do is sit around and do drugs and have orgies, which he doesn't realize that it's orgy. But he's like, they go to their secret clubs and have orgies on Easter. Easter orgies. It's awesome. It's like a classic scene. It's really good. It's a classic. It's one of those classic scenes that I can't show in class, if you know what I mean. So some people. Oh yeah. Then he says that all liberals are queers, and then the poor and the middle class kids just copy the rich. So he hates them too. But he just hates everything. And it's one of those things where it's like some people blame their own failures in life or their own shortcomings on life on anybody but themselves. Like I know somebody who they always wanted to be a firefighter, but like somebody, so like they felt that they were racially excluded from that job, and kind of like blames their whole like negative trajectory of their life on that, and you can see where that happens. That happens all the time, and I kind of blame people for it. It's not good, but I'm sure I do it all the time. But I usually blame like my parents, I don't blame like I don't blame races, at least, but that's probably because I'm a white kid. Anyway, I guess I'm not a kid anymore. Anyway, and I don't really blame my parents. I'm kidding. So anyway, Bill ends up entering this bar. Obviously, these characters interact. And Bill, who's a wealthy liberal guy whose daughter is now like in the hospital, nearly OD'd on drugs. And Joe, they kind of start speaking the same language. And I won't spoil any more after that, because the second act is basically them teaming up and going on this drunken odyssey through each other's worlds, like going, sorry, I said like, weaving from the bowling alley, comparing bowling to golf, and the bar to the club, and shows them like what middle class people do, and this is how there's really no difference except the money. Just because you're rich doesn't mean you're smart, and shows them all the the high society living. And then they slowly work their way into, it really is kind of an odyssey. It reminds me in some ways of After Hours, the Scorsese movie, where then they get involved with some hippies and infiltrates their world. And you start realizing, there's this great scene where Bill finally can, like, before they really get deep into it, Bill confesses to Joe that when he killed Frank, that he felt terrible but good. And there's this great scene. It's a close-up in Joe's face, and he goes, like in the war. And you're just like, oh my God, this whole movie's now got this backdrop, You're just hit with this, like, oh, dude, these people have been affected by something. Like, this violence comes from somewhere, and they see it as an answer. A problem solver. Again, So they end up having a whole crazy night with psychedelic orgies and all sorts of stuff happening, and it's really great. They get to see each other's way of life and opinions, and then it explodes. The end is an explosion of violence. And Peter Boyle was so upset at audiences' reaction to the violence. It's supposed to be like a cautionary tale, and the violence is supposed to make you go, oh my God, look what people are driven to. But America felt, at least enough of America agrees with Six-Pack Joe, Joe Six-Pack, this character, this racist, close-minded loser, who blames all of his, womanizer, has no respect for anything except for like work, getting your work done is the only thing that matters. But, and enough people were like, yay about it, that he didn't take the all the lights are going out now, Jesus. They didn't take the role in French Connection, because he didn't want to do violent roles anymore, because he just was really heartbroken by people like seeing him as the protagonist, where you're supposed to sympathize with him, and then ultimately see where his shortcomings are, because that's much better. That's much better storytelling for you to sympathize with a character for a while, really be on board with them, and then go, oh, I see why you've been led here, but you've been led astray, my son. So yeah, it's actually a really, really good movie. It kind of has a cult following. It's a little heavy-handed in its message, but it works, man. This is the second time I've seen it, or maybe even the third time, and I really got into it this time. Was really impressed by how it keeps everything together, flowing nicely, and it's intriguing, and it still hits the plot point structure markings that you kind of need to stay engaged in a movie without feeling too bored, but never feeling like any scene is too much. That's the one thing I'll say also. The 70s, so many movies in the 70s, they have scenes, just like a beginning, middle, and end, a nice scene, and it plays out, and it's like a short film, and then it's only like 10 of those strung together, and then you have a movie. Now I feel like it's like 150 of those scenes, like little chopped up, all crammed together, and you never really get to have all these great little moments, like Susan Sarandon painting on her face for more than like a second. In a movie now she'd be like boop, boop, and then they'd be like ma'am, but it's like 2 minutes of her going and I think they're always afraid of losing attention, modern film studios when they release stuff, but that's obviously not the way to go. So this also has a pretty big impact in terms of teaching the studios that it's time to change what we're doing, changing of the guards. Essentially, people who studied film history know that, one of the big turning points was Easy Rider, obviously, showing that these crazy kids, we just give them a hunk of money and then they turn around and make a bunch out of it, and we're done. Things like the 10 Commandments and greatest show greatest show in the world, around the world in 80 days, all those movies. It's no, there's no room for those anymore. It's over. So, for example, this movie in 1970, probably shot in 69, cost $100K, which is nothing. $100K. That was his budget. It grossed $19 million. So that's a huge, I can't do the math, but it's a lot. That's a good percentage on your investment. So this definitely, starts tipping the balance. And this is one of those movies, and we get 2 big stars out of it, Peter Boyle and Susan Sarandon. They both become stars. So I think even in perpetuity, it shows that it's one of the important films on that scale of tipping it towards the director's medium and American New Wave. Even though we've already started it, I really think the starting point, and it's not me who thinks this, I think a lot of people would agree, that the starting point is Bonnie and Clyde in 67, because it has all the elements, and people like just kind of, it's edgy with violence and sex and stuff, and audiences responded to it. So I think it was a note to the studios where they're like, because how the studios work. If there's a movie that like has a balloon in it, then the next year it's like Balloons 2000, the movie starring just balloons, and then like there'll be a spin-off about the strings tied to the balloons, and then you can buy like a video game where you walk around town and you capture balloons, and you're actually like geo mapping your neighborhood for the Soviets. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna do some music. It's gonna be very harsh because that's what I'm into right now. So it's not going to be too loud, but the stuff I was messing with this morning sounded pretty harsh. Hopefully the camera will change. Let's see. Oh, yeah, dude, we're getting back. Getting back in the habit. Anyway, I highly recommend Joe. It's awesome. It's certainly not a perfect film, but Peter Boyle's performance alone is worth it. And it's great. Look at the poster. Would you look at the poster? Anyway, I'm going to play a little bit. If you have anything you want to say about Joe, I will respond after. That was kind of what the point was supposed to be. that, let me switch back, that the music was supposed to give a chance for people to ask questions and like write things in, and then but I never mentioned that. I thought it would just happen naturally. And it's not supposed to be as red in the background. I was trying to do a red, white, and blue thing. Oh, God. Oh, God, Joe. That's an Ed Sheeran cover called Ooh Baby, I Love Summer Evenings. Okay.